Swing It Podcast, goosedigital.com, episode 105. Who do we have?
Kevin Butler.
Michael Turksani.
We think it's 105.
We think it's 105. We're pretty sure it is, but we'll be happily proved wrong, I'm sure.
Someone will let us know.
So we're talking about, guess what? Big surprise, AI.
But yes, but an interesting tweak on it. Cool little thing came into my inbox, a few meetings with a prospect to be customer. And that's the whole notion of if you were to rebuild your marketing department and your marketing program, brand new company and brand new infrastructure as far as tech and processes go, what would you do? Complete blank canvas.
Yeah. And I think that that's, one of the things that a lot of companies are struggling with at the AI kind of inflection point is they've got all these established processes, they've got an established tech stack. So, for most organization, it will be a retrofit or a fit in, or, they don't really have the luxury. And maybe this customer doesn't have, the entire thing, but it looks pretty close to that, where we can kind of come in and say, look, you don't have all this existing infrastructure, existing people process. You can kind of set things up from scratch. There is a sales CRM. I'm sure we'll get into that. But, I do know that listening to some of the incubators out of Silicon Valley, that they are much more, this is more on the product side of the equation, not so much marketing, but I think it's organizational kind of philosophy, is they are looking for kind of I want to say it's probably buzzword, like more of an AI first thinking.
Yeah.
Let's not build a legacy organization. What does that actually mean? Let's build something that has kind of from the ground up. And there's a lot of things that we're not going to get into of how you would structure, your business from scratch. But I do think just within the lens of marketing, if you had the luxury of being able to say, wow, like we can set this department up right now, AI first, if you want to like buzzword that, what would we do?
Yeah, I even think the familiarity is holding people back, myself included, right? We've had just casual conversations about a world where we're not using Salesforce, as a CRM. But Salesforce for us has been a CRM and effectively a process governor for probably the better part of a decade and a half. And so even the thought of what's a world like without leads and opportunities and all that, it's a bit uncomfortable, because so much of what we do is wrapped around the knowledge of how we would do it in these systems. So if we said, well, let's just strip that out and we're using a different CRM, maybe more modern AI first CRM or something else altogether, what would that look like? How would that change our approach?
Yeah.
And then you start thinking about that and realize, wow, okay, I could do almost anything now that I'm not tethered to specific ways that, say, Salesforce, or it could be HubSpot or anything else, does things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that we are going to get into some concepts of what a fresh marketing department put together from an AI first, AI up kind of approach is going to look like. But I do think that it's, you know what you know. And if you've been building, campaigns and looking at accounts and looking at leads and looking at, landing pages and email programs a certain way for so long, having, turning that over into a system or an AI kind of can be very uncomfortable for people, right? You may not understand how these things are working. And I think that that's going to freak people out.
Sure. You have to have a degree of trust or even faith in these new systems. They're not bulletproof proven. I think they work pretty well. And I think the human role, or the human in the loop, is you're going to still have to test these things to ensure they do work the way that they're intended to. And not just assume that everything that AI spits out is going to be perfect. You have to test it still.
Right.
Puts more emphasis on the QA side of things, whereas before, maybe you didn't QA as hard because you knew, having built it yourself, it's built right. So that's a change in process as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to separate and have a separate kind of whole one that we're going to talk more about the rules and what we're seeing emerge for modern marketing teams and the type of, call it like AI capabilities, technical capabilities that we're certainly bringing into our organization. We never thought we would. And it's pretty fascinating to see, the shift that's occurring here. but we are going to talk more about like kind of the MarTech kind of stack side of, what you might do if you had the ability to put this in from the ground up, instead of, what, maybe we can contrast that a little bit on what you would have done today. I do think that there is a lot of, you could say AI is almost a distraction for some people. I don't think you can ignore it, but certainly you can ignore it. But I do think it's pretty easy to go down rabbit holes, and then you could be in a situation where, man, like this is really an exercise in learning, and you should structure that learning, because you can say, well, now that took me 4 times as long to do using this AI. It was great learning, but we all have a job to do. So I think that a lot of marketing teams are sort of faced with like, how do we spend enough time learning and getting out in front of this, versus just getting our day-to-day job done and launching the campaigns that we're all like here to do, right?
I have a few thoughts on that. They're sort of unrelated to the topic of this podcast, but really quickly, I think AI is overwhelming for a lot of people, and in particular, people who haven't really fully adopted it yet. The good news, which is also bad news, depending on if you view this as glass half full versus half empty, is that the earliest adopters, or the so-called experts, they're about 2 years into their journey now, and theoretically, you are not yet started. So it does feel like, oh wow, there's already such a huge gap, but that's nothing when you consider how quickly these things are changing and evolving. My other feeling is, it's coupled with that, is that a lot of marketers in particular, we could say business professionals, but in this case, just marketers, they're so focused on trying to boil the ocean that like it's just way too much for them to process, and they just don't do anything. I think marketers are guilty of not doing little things in order to incrementally improve their adoption themselves. So stop thinking about how do you rewire your entire department, and think more, okay, well, how could I use it for this one particular application? And then just kind of start to iterate and build on top of that.
Okay, so let's get into like what things come to mind for the, fresh marketing department built on AI from a kind of a MarTech stack perspective.
Sure. So for the purpose and intent of this conversation, the only thing for sure, assume Salesforce is the CRM. Nothing else exists in the stack presently.
Okay.
So that's our only sort of gimme.
Okay. So you got a fresh marketing team. They don't have any existing tech stack they got to worry about, but they do have a Salesforce CRM. Presumably, sales team is using that to basically take sales qualified leads. And
it runs the sales process, which for the point of this conversation, assume the process is pretty good. They've got 5 to 8 sales reps. It's more mid-market and enterprise level SaaS sales. And yeah, let's just assume that the data inside is okay, and the tool itself is being used pretty well.
Okay, so maybe I'll go, and then you like poke and prod in terms of like some of the areas that you think of, or that you want me to clarify, that come to mind. So,
well, one, you've got the system of record. It's the database for all your prospects, customers. So that's the same as far as we've thought about CRM for the last decade.
Right.
You've got no execution or communication layer on top of that. We don't have any ability to enrich data or even pull in and scrape internet signals. We don't even have necessarily reporting tools. So there's a lot of directions you can go. I guess what I would ask from you is, how do you view the priorities sequence of stacking these functions of a MarTech stack?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say is that, when Claude came on the scene, what was it, last November, right? Roughly. So this podcast, we're June 2026. That was kind of the moment where we saw kind of this, you refer to this as well, this connective tissue kind of emerge, where you could do some stuff prior to that, but it was very limited. And now we're sort of seeing where actually with, one of these frontier models having infrastructure or capabilities to sort of reach out to other systems and take action on your behalf, meaning they understand, they have skills and tools to be able to do things. So I can create a deck. I know what a landing page is. I know what these things are. I don't know how they are for your business, and I don't know where to get the data from, et cetera, et cetera. But that was like the moment where it was like, whoa, if we had these systems connected, you could arm a marketing person and have them interact with that data through your LLM directly. So I think that what that means is that the tool set that you pick into the future, and we're already seeing with this how a lot of these SaaS players are operating, is that the tools that we think about in the future really have to be kind of machine to machine first, if you will. So less so about sophisticated UIs that we might be going into as, what we were doing for the last 20 years and clicking through things and visual builders and stuff. Less so that, and more about what you said earlier, maintaining the capabilities, maintaining the governance, making sure that that underlying system has the control framework in place, but how you interact with that system is going to be less so through an interface by a human and more so through the machine to machine interface between your workflow system and your AI system.
I think what's exciting too is we're moving away in the MarTech landscape from these platform systems into more of like middleware and best of breed. And I like that because I feel like for the longest time is everything wanted to be a platform. And before you know it, most marketers have 6 different tools they've got to log into to do their jobs. And that became the spaghetti string of clunky integrations that didn't really work and these MarTech like zombie stacks, right? So now all of a sudden you can get these point solutions. They're one, more cost effective as we look at our budgets, but two, they're just going to integrate way better because none of them have to be that visualized platform. It's all going to centrally feed into whatever is at the top of this. Maybe it's your CRM. And it's just going to do the one thing it's supposed to do really well.
Right. So I think, when we there's a lot of elements that you already got into, but I think if you looked at it from that perspective and you said, okay, like, let's say it's going to be email, and we know we're going to need to use email. We know we're going to need to send emails to our customers. We know we're going to need to nurture leads. We know we're going to have potentially prospects, depending on what's going on, come through there that we meet at events or whatever the case may be. So are we going to go get an email system that, is more traditional with UI, UXs and allow us to do things? Or are we going to get an email system that actually allows us to pipe in, for lack of a better phrase, designs that AI can build for us off of on-brand design frameworks and show us a test, send, and execute a send based on that. So, that could be something like we've talked about resend, and that's a platform that you could use. So, part of that evaluation is kind of different because a lot of what we're used to seeing when we evaluate tools is going to be, hey, like take us to the demo. Oh, look at these interfaces. Look, I can go and I can do these things. It's rarely, hey, what's the capability of, at least from a marketing perspective, what's the capability of your API? What's the capability? Do you have an MCP connector that is already available? And do you have these things? That's going to become a key criteria when you're thinking about stitching together your marketing platform.
Far more so than like, show me the WYSIWYG editor and all that.
Right.
I think, which is really exciting because I think most marketers who've been around a while can probably admit to themselves they spent way too much time in these editors just trying to make something work when it's like the editor's not great or something's breaking, you don't know why. I think this takes out a lot of that concern and worry.
Some of the things that we've done, and we've experimented with, so that was kind of like the email layer, which you could say, Salesforce.com, let's just say it's our data compliance. So let's just say, for the sake of argument in this exercise, that we have an API to Salesforce. We can, push pull leads, we can push pull segments and stuff like that. So we're not replicating that data somewhere else. So we got the security on our side. We can execute the programs that we need to execute without replicating all that data into another system. So that's just
our system of record, and then what I've long called the system of execution, which in this case is our email platform resend.
Sure, exactly. So we can execute our emails in there. So I think at that point, other programs, a lot of programs that you would have, whether it's through demand gen, paid media, or any kind of direct response type environment, would probably be a landing page. And again, like in this case, you'd probably want to have a form platform that you can, again, securely ingest data into your Salesforce environment as a lead capture. And you can also, again, through that connective tissue, if you're going to have, let's say, like an Anthropic environment as part of your marketing team, you can actually design those landing pages within their environment. And you can, again, you've got on brand designs that you would have as a brand kit, and you're kind of fairly confident that we've got a few different styles of landing pages that we use, et cetera, et cetera. Marketing person can go in there and prompt in, I'm looking for this type of landing page. They can preview it, and then they could actually run that deliverable into something like a Cloudflare, which is what we've tested, and we've had landing pages, a bunch of them that are up, that are live today, in fact, that power a bunch of our programs. And, we're getting high quality, distributed, national, global, whatever we need, web hosting secure from Cloudflare specifically for our landing pages, with the benefit of us being able to generate those pages very quickly. And we're not going through, again, like you said, like a traditional builder process. We can get them to be highly consistent across region, across product line, completely different if we want to go that direction. But the key point being that a marketer now can sort of ideate their program. And we were talking about this before we started. They can ideate their program and move quite quickly through revision steps without feeling the weight of, I know if I go back and I want to make this change, which, if we're being honest, is probably better for the business, but it's going to push us back an afternoon or a day.
Yep.
Or maybe two, because now I've got to go back through a painful process of getting people to log into a tool and get it done.
And the relationships it saved. You don't have to drive your designer crazy and put them in strain, or now they're working overtime when really it's, 5 to 10 minute exercise of reprompts and tweaking.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got, just keeping with this system of record, that's Salesforce. We've got our system of execution, which is email, which is resend. Then we've got what I would call AI operations layer, which we're going to say is the Anthropic cloud layer that's helping really with things like whether it's creative output in the form of landing pages, possibly
email designs,
even ad design, maybe even ad copy, content like blogs, other assets, things like that. Where do you see data enrichment coming in?
Well, I think we've looked at some of these systems, and one of the point that I would raise, particularly around data enrichment, looking at some of those platforms, is that a lot of these systems are wise to the shift that's occurring, right? So the bigger players are moving away from sort of a per seat methodology, something around usage, particularly around either their MCP servers or their APIs. So they know that what used to be, in some cases, not always, kind of high levels of included API calls are now rapidly diminishing to no included API calls, and in fact, charging for access, and depending on your usage, trying to get back to where we would be on a per seat model,
which is loosely respun as value or usage based.
Yeah, it is.
Some of that I agree with, because even in the seat pricing model or matrix, you still had situations where, well, I need the starter pack, but I need to then boost that to get the API calls or the other extra things that aren't normally part of it. So one way or another, you were kind of already doing this anyways.
So it's a caveat, because I certainly wouldn't build, I wouldn't build into the calculus that, this new AI first model is going to somehow reveal rapidly lower pricing to the marketing department. I mean, I don't think we can say that. I think in some cases, whether it's a Cloudflare piece, so there could be some elements that you can, see some savings, but we don't really know without looking at everything, like what the end result would be. It's a caveat, because we are seeing, when I ran some, let's say, enrichment using Clay and the stuff that we want to do, I ran some high level numbers and I compared it to the size of the sales team. And it was kind of striking that if you want to go the API model, it comes out very close to what you'd be paying on a per seat model. And it makes sense, because if now we don't have seats, we don't really need seats inside of, let's say, the enrichment system, because we've got AI kind of enriching leads on an agent basis that's scheduled once a night and looking at stuff for us. That completely changes their model, right? So they have to figure out how to charge.
They do. It also forces marketers to understand, what specifically do we need from these value-based pricing point solutions? do we really need this, and this when we're talking about things like credits or calls, and that one thing is going to use up 10% of what you expected to use in a month in the next 10 minutes.
Yeah, it was a good point. I mean, we looked at that for ourselves, are we going to try to re-enrich X number of records, once a week or once a day, or, like, does it get to the point where, or sorry, rapidly gets to the point where you have to like really build those business rules to say,
Where's the line?
where's the
What are
line?
we
Yeah.
continually enriching, right? And then is there some point in time where we're not interested in enriching contacts that are 2 years old?
Mm-hmm.
We just assume they've moved on, or we'll wait till they reach out to us. And in fact, what we'd rather do is use these kinds of tools for things like signals on our newest leads,
Right.
because that's where theoretically the most activity and engagement is going to come from.
Right. So, and I think that that's like ultimately your ability to kind of keep on top of some of these tools, because, there is, it's sort of a faster time to market, where a lot of these companies that are embedding AI into their system, and they're saying, well, we're just not even, like, if you look at, let's go back to like a resend, for example, like, you're not going to get a bunch of tooling in there, like a UI. You're not going to, like, there is some UI, but you're not going to get levels of tooling that you're used to, right? If you're running email for a company, right? But their position is, well, we can kind of rethink the game here. And I could see that happening, kind of just pick one of your pieces of your stack and just being like, wow, like, there is no UI for this. They're coming to market quite quickly. They offer signals and they offer like intent-based environments, but they don't have an interface for our sales team. It's really a back end. It's really the rules engine. It's really the data engine that we're buying, and we can plug into it. It's kind of on us to figure out how to best use that information. And I could see more companies coming out of the gate just being like, yeah, we're not a Zoom info. We don't have to have all this complicated logic and complicated UI front ends to give you the data that you actually need to power your AI layer, your AI marketing operations layer. We have that already. And their advantage is that, yeah, we're never going to have that technical debt. We're never going to build all that stuff. But
I also think, like, for anyone listening thinking, wow, this is just so much AI throughout the stack, it kind of isn't. And what I mean is, Salesforce isn't really AI. Resend isn't really AI.
Nope.
And even Clay, it's not really AI either. There's like integrations and automations in there, but the only real piece that we've laid out in this new stack is the AI operations layer. And that governs a lot of the other things, and it sends out directives and things like that. But it's not like you have to be some AI whiz to go and take hold of this theoretical stack that we're building here.
Right. And I think that's a key point that we talked about earlier, is that not unlike you're going to get a Salesforce Marketing Cloud quick start and up and running on a bunch of modules and that type of thing that you would typically engage an MOps agency for. I think it makes sense this is why one of your clients is talking to you about this. It does make sense for you to enlist some support to onboard this type of methodology, so that you're not turning into trying to become an AI expert and all these things. And I think that's a real key, as we were saying earlier, a real unlock for marketing departments, is that we've said for a long time that marketing departments have basically turned into mini IT organizations. They're procuring like IT. They've got technical resources on their team. They've been weighed down with what is essentially like a bunch of technology to try to enable their programs. And, they've done some cool things, but as a result, there are a lot of constraints, and there's a lot of friction, and there's a lot of time lag to do anything. So
plus a lot of waste. Like, I feel like a lot of the MarTech stack, the traditional MarTech stack that a lot have either put in place or inherited, is very similar to moving into a house for 4 years and then realizing you don't use 3 of the rooms. And so when you think of this stripped down infrastructure that we're talking about, you might hear this and say, is that it though? And there's a lot of offshoots and other point solutions. If you do a lot of direct mail, maybe there's still like the Sendoso thing, or maybe we haven't talked about reporting, which we can in a moment. But so yes, there's always more, but the idea is like this nimble stack only contains the things that you absolutely need within your quarterly programs all the time. We haven't touched on like lead scoring and a bunch of that stuff. And we can theoretically come up with ways where maybe that AI operations lens or layer actually score against things that you really care about, and it amalgamates data and consolidates from all these different places. But you're not like, we've gone through hundreds and hundreds of marketing automation platforms over our time, and I would say less than 50% is being used across the board.
Yeah, I'm not coming here saying that with some of the exciting new AI developments that are out here, and thinking of it to your point as more of a connected tissue, and really connecting your platforms, rethinking some of the platforms is, going to be the end all kind of like technical headaches. Or but we've said for a while that these marketing organizations tend to uh they have to focus so much on the technology layer. We just got out of a meeting this afternoon with a national organization that we're working with, and we're trying to do customer lifecycle marketing. We're trying to actually improve both the experience of their customers that buy from them, as well as grow the share of wallet for the organization that they buy from, customer of ours. Yet the entire meeting was a conversation, we won't get into platforms, around data and the inaccuracies and the challenges around this stuff, to the point where the businesses are actually having to, I want to say, like, make concessions to a large degree of not
Yeah.
being able to really get the programs that they want out the door. And it's why not have 5 programs? Well, the only reason why we can't have 5 is because we can't even get one right because of all this stuff. So I think that the vision here, I think if you're painting the picture of like a fresh organization that can kind of start from scratch, I think the vision here is to actually get back to marketing, and allow the marketing teams to dream up 4 or 5 different ideas, see 4 or 5 different pieces of creative, see how those would come together on landing pages, pick 2 or 3 that they would love, shut the other 2 down, and have that all in an afternoon.
I think it's really exciting. Like, once you get over the, wow, this is totally new and different, just the way I'm envisioning this stack based on the conversation, it just feels so much lighter weight. It just feels like all the things are there for a specific purpose. And again, we could come up with other point solutions we need in time, but the idea is like, this is the minimum viable of what a typical marketing program would need. It's got the ability to capture new leads. It's got the ability to communicate and distribute messages too. It's got the ability to create assets, content, whatever you need.
Mm-hmm.
And probably the most important part now is like that enrichment layer, whether it's grabbing signals of engagement, interest, and need, or even just helping build in more data points on your prospects and customers so that your sales team, which again is built into this scenario, can go and actually do something with. So I think it's really exciting. You're
Yeah,
not
and I
bogged
think
down with
you know
old school
the
stuff.
whole time for the podcast today, I mean, we didn't bring up once, oh, that would allow us to let that person go, like, or now we can be 10 times as efficient and we don't need 3 people on the team. Like, we didn't even bring that into the calculus, and I don't think that is part of the calculus. I think most of our clients, I would say almost all of our clients, would come to us and say, or not coming and saying, we need to reduce our budget. What they're saying is, we would love to do more,
Yeah.
right? And but we don't have an unlimited budget. How can we do? And I think, to your point before, on an individual, on a marketing team, not really having the bandwidth or the focus to do maybe the things that they would love to do, in terms of like, hey, I want to look at 3 iterations, but I'm just so bogged down with the 1 iteration, I can never get to 3. To me, that's the exciting promise here, is that if a marketing team can go to to like legitimately go back to the business and be like, we're going to be moving twice as fast. It's not about cutting heads. It's about actually getting to the success of the department, and we think we can get there faster. Maybe it's more than twice as fast in a lot of cases. To me, that's the real vision. And not only that, because we had this example yesterday that we went from concept to ad for LinkedIn and for email to landing page, all within about an hour and a half. Fully baked Goose Digital, launching tomorrow. So it's doable. It's not. This isn't just fantasy talk today. This is like an actual thing that we've tested and we know is possible.
Yeah, and that outcome and process, I think under this stack that we're talking about today, can probably happen within a quarter. So it's not like it's like, oh, okay, we're looking at a multi-year adoption of process and technology to get to that minimum viable state. I think it's pretty fast. Now, I understand it also doesn't account for ripping out old processes and replacing technologies, but I think like you could get there pretty quick.
I agree. I mean, I almost feel like for many of the basic use cases, we had this with one of our clients down at the the Canadian, what is it, the manufacturing technology show
Mm-hmm.
just a few weeks ago, FabTech, and you know, they weren't particularly pleased with their booth. It was done by one of their marketing resources out of the US. But it just sort of was striking that actually, you know, you can get that kind of thing now quite quickly. And where what you said earlier, I think is the key point, is that we're not talking about, you know, deferring the strategy to these systems, right? You got to have strategy. And I think for the most part, that's there. Sometimes the execution isn't what we want. And now with the ability to sort of support us more heavily on the turnaround times and execution, you can get, again, you could have had 5 different versions of that booth looked at, picked one, iterated it, sent it out to printing, but they don't have this infrastructure that you're talking about yet. They're not quite there. So I agree. It doesn't have to be rip out your entire marketing team. You can actually start with that is a perfect use case where somebody's going to be very happy that they went to that event with a fresh booth design, fresh collateral design. And that's a small example, but it kind of replicates to everything else that you're doing.
100%. And it didn't take a whole army and a, you know, huge movement to get to as well. Because I think most marketers also listen to this and think, yeah, every event we do, it's high pressure, high stress, it's last minute, it's like this huge undertaking.
Yeah, to be fair, they're doing, you know, 50 events a year or whatever they're doing. So it's, I get it. It's a process, but it's, to your point, it's one that you should start. So for now, if you guys want to check out what we're doing on our side, we've got the goosedigital.ai. So we've been kind of documenting the journey that we've been on for a while now. And we've got some staff that we hired specifically for this role. They're publishing content once a week, but we're also putting up our experiments and our articles to sort of share the knowledge and what we're doing. We offer some services in this area. You can check those out as well, right? Like some of the things that we're starting to work with. But yeah, I think that was a good start, and we'll go with the next one next time.
Awesome.